Without a doubt, there's been a lot happening in the state of Texas in just the last week, and certainly since the last time we talked to Scott Braddock, who's the editor at the Quorum Report. You can, of course, see that at the quorumreport.com. Am I saying that right, Scott?
You got it, Steve. Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. Let's talk about the idea of a special session. Are you seeing any change in that at all since the last time we talked?
No, and I'm actually encouraged at the fact that so many Texans, maybe for the first time, are really paying attention to state government, asking whether there will be a special session of the legislature. But every indication I get, both from sources off the record and on the record, is that that is not happening at all. And of course, you have covered very well here on KSAT the fact that the governor called for special committees, and that was almost sort of a trick. A lot of people thought, oh, they heard the word special, and so they thought that meant a special session's happening. It's the exact opposite. The committees are set up, as in the estimation of some, as just a delay tactic so that there doesn't have to be any legislative action right now. And to be very clear, if state government was going to do real things, change laws when it comes to gun safety, school security, any of that, it would be the governor and the governor alone who can make that happen. And so far, he's choosing not to.
And, you know, we've had a lot of big topics that have come up with the shooting in Uvalde, gun legislation, and now the migrant deaths. Is there anything else that could potentially happen? These are huge topics that could really prompt a special session.
You know, the thing about a special session is that it's a 30-day window for lawmakers to arrive at some kind of a solution. And so you're right. There are all of these big topics, big issues that Texans are grappling with. But the fact is, leadership doesn't have specific plans lined up already to present to lawmakers. You know, if the governor had a specific plan for any of the things you're talking about, he could call a special session and ask lawmakers to pass legislation that would make his plans happen, make them possible. But so far, he doesn't have any, and he's looking forward to the next regular session in January.
We're showing pictures, obviously, from the governor's news conference yesterday when he was down in Eagle Pass. You have very good sources on both sides of the aisle with Democrats and Republicans. Yeah. Are people around the governor concerned about the fact that the polls seem to be tightening between himself and Beto O'Rourke? You
know, the polls we're seeing right now, and was looking at one just this past week that showed that Beto O'Rourke was within 5 points of Abbott. I mean, that's possible. One thing that you have to keep in mind is when you're talking about polling, it's not a predictor of the future. It's just a diagnostic tool. It's supposed to tell you kind of where the race is right now. And this is before a lot happens, right? We've got months of campaigning to go. You know, we're not through the summer yet. And the governor really hasn't unleashed his mountain of money, his almost unlimited resources. You know that the governor at one point, and this might still be true, I'd have to go back and check, but at one point, he had more money in his campaign account than the Republican National Committee. And so he has unlimited resources. Beto O'Rourke will get a better idea of his finances coming up with campaign finance reports in a few weeks. But until then, we won't really know exactly what the real picture is financially for these two guys. But the issues on the table, as Patty said, are huge. And people want the governor to do something about them. He's just not doing it yet.
Yeah, at one point, wasn't his war chest something in the neighborhood of $60 million? I mean,
Absolutely.
It is a huge war chest for Governor Abbott, that's for sure.
Huge, and he spent about $15 million to get through his primary, which, of course, he won with 66% of the vote.
And I'm kind of curious, how long do we wait? Would there be any inaction that he takes now on any of the big issues that we're doing? Could they potentially hurt him, or is, like you said, is it too early in the game?
You know, the thing that I keep coming back to with the governor's race is that Democrats in this state still really, it's an uphill climb for them, right? And they would have to sort of hit the inside straight when it comes to a lot of different issues to even have a competitive race. Some of those things are starting to break their way, I think. I think people are still very worried about the electricity grid. I saw a private poll on that just the other day that said across demographic groups, people are concerned about electricity. I would have thought that that would be one of the things that might have sort of started to fade for people. But as you may know, according to new state law, ERCOT, you know, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas and some energy providers, they have to send you text messages and get you up to speed on what's happening, even if there hasn't been a real blip just yet, at least in your lights at home, or the AC is still on. But, you know, we're hearing all the time about different problems with the electricity grid. So it's still top of mind for people, whether it's the grid, whether it's Roe versus Wade being overturned, whether it's these deaths, the border deaths, there's the gun violence issue that we were talking about. There's so many things that can make it a competitive race for the Democrats. But Patty, they would still, Beto and the other Democratic candidates would still have to close the deal, and they haven't demonstrated the kind of financial wherewithal or the kind of message that it takes to get that done just yet.
Yeah, and a good indicator of that will be to see how much money Beto's been able to raise after all these things. You brought up a lot of the significant things that we've seen nationally, with Roe v. Wade being overturned, gun control, obviously immigration is becoming a huge issue. Certainly here in San Antonio, it's always been, but perhaps nationally more because of what happened with the migrants on the south side of our city. I am curious if nationally we're seeing people energized by this. Are you seeing that in the state of Texas at all?
I think that we're starting to, and one thing to point out to your viewers is that, and I say this all the time, I sound like a broken record, but I'll say it once again, the election of consequence until proven otherwise in Texas is the Republican primary. And so, for example, when it comes to Roe versus Wade and it comes to abortion rights, the kind of policy prescriptions that are coming from the Texas Capitol are designed to appeal to primary voters. Until the general election really matters and a Democrat punches through and can win there in a statewide race, the Republican Party and the Republican office holders are going to continue to cater to that Republican base because that's the way that they get reelected. That's where their power is derived from. But let's not, let's not leave this out. The main thing that's driving people right now to be angry with the president and with the party in power in Washington, and this accrues to the benefit of Texas Republicans, it's the economy. You know the old axiom, it's the economy, stupid. It always comes back to that, right? And people are worried about inflation. People are worried about the higher price of everything. A lot of people canceling their 4th of July trips right now because there's $5 gas. That's the kind of thing. All of these other things we're talking about affect groups of people and large groups of people, but the economy affects everyone.
Scott, one more question before we let you go. Could I convince you that maybe the governor's race isn't the place where Democrats are going to break through, that maybe there's a down ballot campaign statewide? Maybe it's the lieutenant governor, maybe it's the attorney general. I mean, do you think one of those is more likely than the governor's race?
That's the way it's happened before. Decades ago, it was a U.S. Senate race. Then it was the agriculture commissioner race when Rick Perry beat Jim Hightower years ago. And of course, Perry, who was always ahead of, eventually the governor was always ahead of the political trends. He switched from being a Democrat to a Republican. He was the first Republican office holder, major one, to speak to a Tea Party rally back in 2010. And a lot of establishment Republicans thought that was going to get him killed. Instead, it killed politically, but instead, it accrued to his benefit. He did well because of that. We have a lot of changing demographics in the state. You always hear, Steve, right, that demographics is destiny, but that's not true. Demographics in politics equals opportunity. And Texas is a changing state, from a partisan standpoint. I mean, President Trump, former President Trump, he beat Biden in this state by 6 points. That's the worst performance by a GOP nominee for president in a generation in Texas. We're nowhere near as Republican as California is Democratic. In Texas, Trump carries it by 6, but Joe Biden carried California by almost 30 points. They're much more solid Democrat there than we are Republican here.
It's all who gets out the vote, though, as you and I both know. Scott Braddock,
absolutely,
editor with the Quorum Report. Always appreciate your time, Scott.
Thank you so much, Scott.